On Yom Kippur, I challenged all of us to become very clear about the state of our world in general, but also in particular the state of our nation. I claimed that the days of reckoning from our plundering and polluting our planet were already here, that this unsustainable growth at all costs global economy was coming to an end, and that we had lost both the middle-class economy that was part of previous generations, but also truly our democracy to the wealthy elite and their lobbies. I asked, somewhat rudely, that we let go of our hope to get what we have lost, to get it back. That instead we begin a process of mourning, a process of deep mourning for what in fact we do have lost, what in fact is not coming back. And I know that this was somewhat of a challenge for us to find ourselves able to be in that space. But I made the argument that unless we are able to move into that space and be clearly with what is, with the reality as we are living it today, and move away from our yearning to still be in what was, we were not going to be able to truly wrestle, to truly struggle with what may appear in this day and age, this bleak reality of ours. Now, it's been a few weeks, and we opened the Torah this week to the portion called Noah. Now, most of us know Noah to be the guy who built the ark, the guy who survived the flood. Noah is one of us. Noah is one of us. Noah, if you look in the story, Noah never ever displayed, spoke of, or acted upon any kind of hope whatsoever. This was not his thing. Hope was not part of Noah's makeup at all. The Torah says that he was righteous in his generation, when his generation was completely corrupt, and the civilization of which he was a part was collapsing and unsustainable. I suspect that he knew long before God told him that the flood was coming. I imagine him years before God said anything, that he was himself deeply mourning for the loss of this civilization and this people of which he was a part. And he never denied reality. He never denied reality. He was really clear with what was going on. He never complained. He never sought to save what he understood to be beyond saving. He never sought to get back what he might have, or he knew was already lost. Instead, he decided to be present to what was real in his generation, to what was real in his life, and to wrestle and to struggle with that. And out of that wrestling, out of that struggle, he felt a call. He felt a call. We can call it the voice of God booming through the sky, but it doesn't matter. He felt a call. And the call was that he was going to build an ark. He was going to build a container. He was going to build a container that would allow the transition, that would allow for the transition from a world, from a civilization that was collapsing and into the next. He was going to save whatever he was going to save, but he needed a container to allow for that transition to happen. And I'm wondering if this moment in our history, this moment of our struggle, isn't also calling us right now to build an ark. To build an ark. This civilization that might, if we survive the coming flood, that might be born out of the current struggle, I suspect will be born from two major shifts in consciousness. One, we're going to need to redefine, we will redefine completely and absolutely what success means. Well, let me expand a little bit. We're going to redefine what a successful human life on this planet truly is. We're going to redefine for ourselves what humanity's purpose on this earth truly is. And I'm thinking about it as a complete global consciousness. We're going to redefine also personally and individually what a fulfilled, successful human life truly is about. And I suspect that we will move away from the definitions we are following today, because those definitions are no longer viable to support life in its many forms on this planet. So we will need to leave behind what we were born into and perhaps have not questioned to this moment, and to define for ourselves what it truly means to be a fulfilled, complete, whole human being, successful in his life or in her life on this earth. I think that's part of what is going to usher in a different modality, a different model for civilization. Two, we are going to have to let go, to surrender, to do away with the core tenet of the civilization we were born into and are currently exiting, which is the most self-destructive, suicidal core tenet that has animated this civilization of which we are a part, and that is growth. We live in a civilization that is founded on this idea, on this concept that Everything has to be following growth. Everything has to, every business, every organization, everything has to keep on going, keep on growing to infinity, really. It's like there is no limit that is being placed on this concept of growth. And the infinity of that idea is unsustainable on a finite planet. So this false concept of never-ending growth is what is really killing us. And it's going to need to be transcended and replaced as we transition into a new modality, a new model for a more holistic civilization. I'll give you just one example of what that might look like. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, and nor is it my purpose to do this, but you are familiar with the GDP, the gross domestic product. This is how we measure how well we are doing as a nation, for example, as every nation has that for themselves. And it's really what it is measuring is economic growth. That is the core principle that animates that concept of GDP. And GDP gets positive results in times of war, or in times of major catastrophes, natural disasters, and so on and so forth. Why? Because all of those terrible things stimulate the economy. And that is how we measure today the success of our nation, of many nations. Now, I'm not the first one to say that, and I've heard it many, many times over, but I think that we will be shifting from this concept of GDP, which is very skewed, to maybe something that would sound like GDH, the gross domestic happiness standard, where states, nations' success will be measured on how happy, content, healthy their citizens, all their citizens, and that's a very important word, all their citizens truly are. Now you may be asking, so how do we get from where we are today to where we might be tomorrow? I don't know. But we're going to need to build an ark. And what does this ark look like? Well, that will depend on how we answer the question that we need to ask ourselves right now, in this moment in our history. And that question is, what would soften the blow of the shock that is coming, of this massive paradigm shift, this flood that is ahead of us? So that most of us can stay afloat in the tumultuous, raging waters that are going to flood our existence in the months and years ahead. Now, I don't have the answer to that question. I have a partial answer that I have come up with in my own wrestling recently. Maybe it's a piece of the ark, the front, the back, the top, I don't know which floor. But one of the keys, I think, that is going to help us build this transitionary container from what is dying to what is yearning to be born is UBI. I don't know if you heard of that, of those three letters, Universal Basic Income. There is a movement that is growing of people who are getting together and working on a universal basic income. Actually, my daughter and I, where is Amalia? I don't know where she went. We're in San Francisco yesterday, spending the day at the first major conference on universal basic income with hundreds of people in the Mint building of San Francisco, which was a really perfect place to have that conference. Universal basic income is, for those of you who might not know this concept or hear it here for the first time, is a guaranteed, universal, guaranteed minimum income for every citizen of our country. And it is meant in this moment of great transition in our economy, in our society, in our political landscape, to give people a floor below which they could not fall. So depending on where you would live in America, you would get maybe $1,000 a month per individual, maybe $1,500 a month as a floor, as a minimum guaranteed universal income. And what it would do is that in times of turmoil, as everything is shifting, as the paradigms are evolving, it will bring kind of a safety net for all of us, old and young, to survive those tumultuous times until the economy reconstitutes itself into whatever different model it will take. What it does also for me, which is perhaps even more important, is that having a universally guaranteed basic income will remove fear from our lives. I mean, I want you to imagine for a moment. I want you to imagine for a moment a place where each of us were guaranteed a minimum of $1,500 a month in your bank. I want you to imagine a world where there will be no more fear of going hungry, no more fear of being homeless, no more fear of poverty. Can you imagine what that would do for the rest of us, for all of us? That we would not have to take that job that we hate and go there every day just because we need to have some kind of something so we can pay the bills. That we might be freed from this burden of fear in our lives and be able to explore the most creative parts of ourselves, the more entrepreneurial parts of ourselves. Imagine a world with less fear. We would have to redefine our education system from the ground up. Because right now our schools are built in order for those kids who go through each and every one of those grades to end up with the ability to get a job. And they're set up in extremely competitive ways in order to mimic the world that will be once you're out of school. So those kids are taught to compete with each other. Only the best will get the best jobs. Only those who come from the wealthiest family will get to the best schools. What would a world look like if our education system was actually there to educate? Just because. Not to prepare kids for the job market. I believe that this UBI concept, this universal guaranteed income, not only would be a tool as a part of the arc that will help us transition from a dying civilization to be born civilization, but actually it might usher that civilization in, because it will shift consciousness. It will free its people from the shackles of the fear in which we live, all of us, from paycheck to paycheck, from just one bad illness. So I'd like to start a conversation. I'd like to start a conversation here in this community between us. A twofold conversation. One, a conversation where we would start to dream up the civilization of tomorrow. Because I'm one of those who believe that once we start verbalizing what tomorrow might look like, we are planting the seed to making it be born. Two, I'd like to talk about UBI or other solutions to building that ark that we are going to need to support and heal ourselves through that difficult transition period. Now, there's caveats to you joining in that conversation, I have to say. First, you have to abandon all hopes of salvaging the civilization from which we are exiting. Two, to engage in this process of mourning the loss that we are losing right now. And three, to be in a place where you are willing to wrestle with what is and to see what might emerge from that place. So in a few days, maybe a couple weeks, I will send an email to everybody. And I will set a date and a place and a time. And all of you are invited. I invite you to join me to talk about the world of tomorrow, because we're running out of time. And to begin this journey into a future of possibilities. And it's no mistake that this is the Shabbat of the flood. And it's no mistake that this is the Shabbat of our beginning through the journey of the Torah. To write together the ongoing Torah of our people. To write together the story that is yearning to be written from all of our lives.